Good morning, everyone. How are you doing today? It's early. It's like not 7 o'clock yet. So I just wanted to kind of start where I left off at. Um, I have struggled a lot of my life with anxiety, depression. Ugh. And just feelings of abandonment, just because of my childhood. And I've always felt that I've never fit in. I didn't belong anywhere. Sometimes I still feel that way, you know? And so as I grew into my adult life, I've had relationships. The men that I chose to be in relationships with, most of the time, a lot of the time, all the time, it was because I was afraid to be alone. I didn't know how to be alone. I did it for financial reasons. I needed help. Being uneducated, I didn't go to college, and I was just absolutely afraid to be alone. And I have put myself into some very terrible situations, I have did things I didn't want to do. I've been in some pretty terrible, like abusive relationships because I just didn't feel worthy of anything. And, I wish I knew at least a little bit of what I know now back then, and maybe things would have worked out better, but I have all this experience, and I was so devastated. I was so devastated when I was younger that I didn't know how to live by myself. I didn't know. I was afraid of everything. And, I know when I would get into these relationships, certain relationships, not all relationships, but I would be very jealous, unreasonable. And it was kind of like a two-way. I would be jealous and just a nag. But the partner I was with would be just very physically abusive and mentally abusive. And, nobody wants to live like that. I had gotten to one point in my life to where I had let someone beat me down so much. This is after I had my kids. They were young. I believe my daughter was like 5 at the time, and my son, he was 7 or 8. And my other son, he was older, of course. And I was in a relationship, and I let that person convince me that I was unworthy, that nobody wanted me. And I have always felt like that. But for some reason, that hit so much harder that time. And so he convinced me that my kids were better off without me, that they didn't need me. And I love my kids. I've shown my kids love, and I've always told them that I love them. And because I wasn't told that as a child, I wanted to make sure that my kids, even though being in and out of relationships, and my kids had to go through a lot of crap, you know? And I feel very awful for that. You know, but, you know, I can't change that now. So at one point in my life, it was back in 2000, I was in a relationship, and I let someone convince me that my kids didn't want me, and my kids didn't need me, and they were better off without me. And there was something in my mind that was allowing me to believe that. So I started making a plan to commit suicide. And unfortunately, I used someone to help me with that, and they didn't even know it. And I feel so terrible about that. So, you know, to go about it very quickly, you know, I was in a relationship. This person would, if I went to the store, they would want to know what the mileage was on my car. They would check the mileage when I got home. They would check my cell phone. I mean, it was so ridiculous to live in that. And I was working and taking care of my kids and taking care of his kids, and it was just and the kids weren't the stress. The kids were absolutely just wonderful, but living with him was a nightmare. He did not physically abuse me, which he was probably one of the ones. But the mental abuse was just absolutely just wow. Like he put a tape recorder underneath our house, my house, in the crawl space, and he had it hooked to the phone. We had a landline at the time, and every time I would get on the phone, I kept hearing this little click every 10 seconds or so. Well, I didn't even know. And then someone I was on the phone with mentioned, I think your phone's being recorded. And I thought, well, there's no way. Well, I crawled under the house. Sure enough, I found the tape. I mean, little things like that would happen all the time. We didn't sleep in the same bed. It was just very, very devastating. I mean, and I dealt with this for like 9 years. I put up with it for 9 years, to where I'd gotten so disconnected from myself. I started seeing a doctor, a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, whatever you want to call them. And I was so just distraught that she thought it would be best if she prescribed me some medication. And so this was back in 2000. She prescribed me some Xanax. And it was before they came out with this time release stuff. And she prescribed me 50 pills. And she was like, well, we've got the low dose, the medium dose, and then we have a high dose. But I'm going to go ahead and give you the medium dose, and you can let me know how that works. Okay. I'd never taken anything like that before. So I thought, the kids were at school one day, and I happened to be off work. And so I decided to take one of them just to see what it would do, because I didn't know. I am not kidding. Within 30 minutes, I was out cold for a couple of hours. And then I woke up and I thought, oh my God, I can't even take care of my kids taking these pills, you know. So I put them up in the cabinet. So I had 49 pills left, and I stuck them up in the very top of the cabinet in the bathroom, in my bathroom. And, you know, as the weeks went on, things kept getting worse and worse. Like, he was very, very verbally abusive. And, I mean, he got to where he wouldn't let me go to the store. And my family, my aunt, in another state, the only one that I talked to, she called the police to do a wellness check. And I don't know, something about that situation was, he was very upset about it. And things kept getting worse and worse. And, you know, just like I said, he never physically abused me, but the mental was just ridiculous. And so I had made a plan to commit suicide. I thought, okay, well, you know what? He's right. I am just worthless. My kids would be better off without me, is what I was thinking. You know, plus I was listening to music, like, from the time I woke up in the morning until the time I went to bed. I would have headsets on, and I wouldn't listen to anything. I mean, I would take it off, of course, to, you know, when I picked up my kids from school and, you know, stuff like that. But, you know, I go to church now, so I was reading in the Bible, you know, we've got to protect our ear gates and our eye gates, and you know, life and death is in the power of the tongue. And I do believe that. You can speak terrible stuff over yourself, and the devil will trick you into doing that. And sometimes he does that through music. So I don't want to say what band I was listening to at the time, but it was a very negative band. It talked about suicide and talked about depression, and it was some very hardcore stuff. And so I was listening to that from early in the morning till late in the evening, and I was singing it. I was singing it over and over. And I mean, this was the only band I was listening to, and I had it on repeat. So the whole day I was at work, that's all I was hearing. At nighttime, that's all I was hearing. And I was singing those songs. And the more I kept doing that, the more I would distance myself from myself. Until where one day, and I believe it was on Mother's Day, I didn't give, I didn't care. I don't remember if it was during a weekday or a weekend. I think it might have been a weekend, because I think it was on a Sunday, because the kids were home from school and the kids were outside playing, and I was just having a rough morning. And my boyfriend kept walking in the house. He would come in the house. He would come through the kitchen door. I was in the kitchen. He would come in and he would say something really nasty, like, "Oh, your kids don't love you. They would be better off without you." And then he'd go out the door. A few minutes later, he'd come in and just say something else. And this went on for a couple of hours, to where I was so, hold on, let me back up just for a second. I did decide that I was going to commit suicide. I did. So what I did something very horrible. I called the doctor that had prescribed me that prescription of pills. You know, it was Xanax. I had 49 of them. And I told her that the pills were not working. They either weren't strong enough, or I needed something different. I don't know. She said she was going to call me at a prescription to my pharmacist and I could go pick it up. So she did. Now, this is back in the year 2000. So I go to the pharmacy to pick up my prescription, and it was in a fat bottle. A fat bottle. And I thought, my God, this is double the size of what she had gave me before. There was 150 pills in there. So guess what? I had 100, and these were the strong ones too. I had 199 pills. And then she gave me another prescription of 7 pills of something. I don't know what it was. And so I went ahead, and so I had 206 pills. So back to that day that it was on Mother's Day, and it was on I believe it was on a Sunday, and I mean, it was just a really rough morning, and I think we had been up the night before. He would do some pretty creepy stuff, like I would be in my bedroom and I would have my daughter with me asleep, and I would pretend to be asleep, and he would come in the bedroom and he would stand over my bed and look at me, and then he would turn around and walk away. And you know, I laid there and I could see him. I would barely have my eyes open, and I thought, this guy is crazy, he's gonna kill me, you know. But he never did touch me. He would never touch me. He never touched me our whole, you know, relationship. And but that Sunday morning, I was in the kitchen washing dishes, and he kept coming in and saying these horrific things to me, and I thought, you know what? He's right. I am worthless, and nobody cares about me, and my kids would be better off without me, and I was absolutely 100% convinced at that moment. So I went into my bedroom, I climbed on the cabinet, I got all those 206 pills, and I took them in the kitchen, I opened them up, and it took me 3 handfuls to take all those pills. And my last bump of pills that I took, he happened to walk in through the kitchen door, and he said, "Oh my God, what have you just done? You are going to get me in trouble." That's all he was worried about. He wasn't worried about me. And he tackled me to the ground, but I still took the pills. I had them in my mouth before he tackled me. He was trying to take them away from me. And he got up and walked out the door, and I just continued to do my thing. Whatever I was doing in the kitchen, I don't remember. And the next thing I know, there were 2 ambulance guys walked in, you know, an older gentleman and then a younger guy. The older guy was like, we need to go to the hospital, like right now. Where's the pill bottles you just took? And I had put them in the sink. And so he said, we really, really need to go to the hospital now. And I said, you know, I don't want to go to the hospital. I want to die. Life just super sucks. And nobody cares if I'm gone anyway. And to think about that now in this day, I am just so grateful that I didn't die. I guess I kind of blacked out or something, but the next thing I remember is I kept feeling a vibration. Blah, and I kind of opened my eyes, and I guess I was on the gurney, and they were wheeling me to the ambulance, and I could see people standing around, but they were so fuzzy and foggy, I couldn't make out who they were. so they rushed me to the hospital, and the doctor, the ER doctor, said that I was going to die. Didn't tell me that, told everybody else that, told him that I wasn't going to make it. And they charcoaled me. And I think back on that and I thought, oh my God, what was I thinking? Because I had children that depended on me, and here I was giving up. I was giving up. But you know what? I actually pulled through. I don't know how it happened. I was messed up for probably about 3 months. 3 good months I was messed up. I felt like I wasn't, I don't know, I can't even explain it, but I felt like I was in slow motion. My memory, I couldn't remember things. Even things like way long ago. There's certain things that, and I still can't remember certain things. You know, and that's okay. I lived. It took me 2 years to leave that relationship after that. And it was very, it didn't change. It didn't change at all. And I was still wishing that I had died. At times. And finally, everything, 2 years later, everything just got to be so unbearable, and I knew that I needed to get out of there, because if I didn't, I was going to do something else, and maybe I wouldn't make it this time. So he had busted my cell phone. I didn't have a cell phone. I couldn't call anybody. So I told him one day I was going to the store. I think it was on a Friday. I told him I had to run to the store, so I ran to the mall. I got me a phone. I put it back in the box. I hid it in the trunk of my car. I went home, and he was drinking. So when he passed out, I got 3 laundry baskets, and I made a basket for my son, my daughter, and myself. I went and snuck them into my trunk of my car. And so we went to sleep. And so the next morning came. It was a Saturday morning. And I don't know what I told him, but I told him I had to go somewhere, and he went and checked the mileage on my car, and he said, I expect you back in an hour. Okay, that's fine. So I got in my car, I got my kids in my car, and I drove away. I drove away as fast as I could. I hopped on the interstate and I left. It was scary, but it was relieving at the same time. And you know, him and I had a child together, and the state that I was living in at the time, I didn't know the laws, and apparently I wasn't allowed, even though him and I were married, I wasn't allowed to take my daughter out of state until I notified him first. But you know, and you know, it takes them 3 days to serve them. So they expected me to live with him for 3 days and wait on the police to come there to serve him. Do you know what a dangerous situation they were putting me in? And so I left. And 3 or 4 days later, I went to stay with a cousin. And 3 or 4 days later, the police come knocking on her door. And they took my daughter away. And he went and filed emergency custody. And, you know, and used my suicide against me. You know? So, I was just struggling. I was struggling. So, anyway, you know, I go to church now, and I am so grateful. I am so grateful, and I have so much love I love my family. I have forgiven them. I have forgiven the people that have treated me badly. I've had to forgive myself. And I am just so very grateful, and I feel better talking about this, and I have so much peace and joy in my life now. You know, I'm excited to go to church. I get up in the mornings and I read the Word, and I study a little bit, and have you ever seen The War Room? Well, I don't have enough space in my house for a war room, which I wish I did, but I have a war wall. And I have prayers pinned to my wall, and I just sit in the floor and I pray those prayers for the people that I have on here. And but anyway, I mean, if you're in an abusive relationship, you don't have to stay. They're going to convince you that nobody wants you, that nobody's going to help you. And you know what? That is not true. That is not true. They're going to convince you that you're not smart, you wouldn't be able to make it on your own. And I am here to tell you that is not true. That is not true. It is not going to be easy when you leave, by no means, and you have to think about that. But whether you go to a friend's house, whether you go to a women's shelter, I have been in a women's shelter, and it was a great experience because I learned a lot about myself. You know, we'll talk about that later, but you know, you can do this. You know what? You deserve to have peace in your life. You do not deserve to have someone abusing you mentally or physically. You know, you don't deserve that. Your kids don't deserve that. They deserve for you to show up. And, you know, from my experience, listen to me. I put my kids through hell. My kids have been through hell because of my decisions. So, don't let that happen to you. You know, I'm lucky that I used to worry about my daughter learning from me, but what she did learn from me, and she told me this a long time ago, she was in high school, and her and I were talking. She was in a relationship with a guy that wasn't physically abusive, but he was very disrespectful of her. It was to the point of he was disrespectful and obsessed with her at the same time. I mean, very jealous. It was crazy. And I seen a pattern, and I'm like, oh Lord, we've got to take care of this. And I started talking to her immediately. You don't deserve this. And, you know, of course she had a little bit of resistance, but then she realized, okay. And after they broke up and everything settled back down, she said something to me that it was hurtful, but, you know, it was an eye-opener. But we were talking, and she said, you know, she goes, I'm never going to be like you. And, and because I was in another relationship, and it was abusive. And she said, you know what? I'm never going to be like you. She goes, I am not going to let people treat me the way you let people treat you. People walk all over you and you allow it. And I'm not going to let that happen. And sure enough, she was telling the truth. And I'm so proud of her. She is a blunt young lady. She's very blunt. She's married. I mean, she is like, wow, I'm just so impressed by her mind and the respect she has for herself. So, ladies, we need to have some respect for ourselves. Men, there's men that are abused too. We need to have respect for ourselves. Don't let people treat us like this. So I love you. Don't forget, God loves you. He really does. And if you can get into a church, and sometimes, you know, I had to church hop for a while till I found the right one. And you may have to do that too. But I go to a non-denominational Pentecostal church. It is absolutely amazing. And it has saved my life. I mean, it really has. And I know, you know, a lot of people, I have friends that claim to be atheists and they don't believe in God and they think church is a big joke. But let me tell you, when you're desperate for something and it should be Jesus, because he will never leave you or forsake you. And I am learning that all the time. So, you know, the things that comes into your life, all the bad things that all the things that Satan brings to you, God uses for the good. So that's what I want to do here, is tell my story and tell the things that I've been through. And we're going to be jumping around in different things, but you know what? I get it off my chest, and maybe this might help someone. And, you know, Jesus does love us. He does. We just have to give it to him. And, you know, and you would be, let me tell you, go to church. Read your Bible every day. Even if you just read a chapter, read something. My favorite books of the Bible, I mean, I love all the books, but my favorite book of the Bible is, Proverbs. It's a book of wisdom. You'll read that. I am not kidding. You should read the book of Proverbs. Some of the stuff in there, I'm like, oh my gosh. If I would have read that when I was younger, I would hope my life would have been different, you know. I think my life would have been different if I would have, you know, read that then. So, anyway, I love you. Jesus loves you. Don't forget that. If you're in an abusive relationship, get out. Seriously, get out. You are worthy. Don't let anybody ever tell you that you are not worthy, because you are. So I love you, and I will see you here in a day or so. Bye, guys.